Welcome to FPB's Meet the Candidates. This Cable 10 series allows you, the voter, to hear directly from the candidates their views on issues that are important to our community. This is all leading up to the primary, which is on June 23rd this year. Things are a little different, obviously, as we are social distancing, and so we are conducting our interviews from different locations. We took questions from the community through email and social media, so we have a lot of good stuff to get to, so let's jump right in. Today's guest is Brent Sweger, and he is a candidate for City Commission. Hey, Brent, how you doing?
Oh, good morning and happy Election Day, or what used to be Election Day.
That's right. That's right. We are used to having our primary in May, and it's not happening this year. So we have some extra time to get to know our candidates a little bit, and a different voting procedure, which we'll be talking about at the end of the interview. But just to get started, why don't you tell us about yourself and why you chose to run for City Commission?
Sure. But let me start by saying thank you for this opportunity. This is great that you and the Plant Board are putting this on, because there's no real good way for us to get our name out there and for people to get to know us. So I think a lot of people will turn to these interviews to get some information about us before they cast their vote. So let me start by talking about just why I chose to run. First and foremost, I care deeply about the city of Frankfort. This is my home. This is my family's home. I have so many friends here, and I want what's best for our community and for our neighbors. I've been involved in the community for over 2 decades now, and I've seen what wonderful assets our city has and the potential to make Frankfort even better. A little bit about myself. I grew up in the state of Maryland, and I grew up with my brother, my sister, my parents, and many pets over the years: dogs, hermit crabs, birds. I went to college at Virginia Tech, where I became a civil engineer. And 3 years out of college, I was fortunate enough to land a job working for the Federal Highway Administration right here in Frankfort. So I moved to Kentucky, moved to Frankfort, and worked there for several years. And now I work for the state. I'm an engineer with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. So I've lived here for 25 years now, longer than any other place in my life. And I've chose to live here and raise my family. I'm a father of 2 boys. I have a 16-year-old son, Chase, and Brooks, who's 12 years old. I live with my beautiful partner, Ellen, and we have a dogger together. Her name is Bella, not Ella, Bella, and she's a feisty squirrel chasing Meagle. So
Nice.
That's a little bit kind of on the personal side. Maybe I could touch a little bit on my professional and my civic involvement, just because I think that's sort of relevant.
I was going to ask you, what previous experience do you have that has prepared you think, for being on the City Commission?
Yeah. Well, I first mentioned that I was a civil engineer, and civil engineers are all about planning, designing, and building things that help improve people's lives. So that's what I've done for my entire working career. But more importantly than that, what engineers do is we're trained to solve problems. And there's usually a lot of ways to solve a problem. So you analyze numbers, you talk to people, what do they want, what are their preferences, and what are the impacts that might come from different alternatives. So you need to know all the stuff before you can make a balanced decision. My career over the last decade has been dedicated to finding ways to improve the products. And so in transportation, we deal with designing highways, bridges, pedestrian bicycle facilities. And so we've found ways to save the taxpayers tens of millions of dollars through our value engineering program. I'm also involved in a state employee organization. I've been at that for over 10 years. And that's where we fought to protect our pensions, to try to get pay raises. It's been a tough fight, but I've been involved, and I've led that organization for 3 years. I've also served on the Franklin County Women's Shelter Board. It's such an important organization for Frankfort, for women and families that are in dire need. And so I was on that board when we actually acquired the very first shelter building and hired the first executive director. In 2006, I started with 3 friends of mine, a group called Walk Bike Frankfort. I think a lot of people have heard of Walk Bike. We started by creating a master plan. So we have a master plan for walking and biking facilities all over town. It's a long-term plan. It's one that's going to take a while. But we've also been involved in making some projects a reality. So you see the trail and sidewalks along Leestown Road, or the trail on Stedmantown Road, the Riverview Trail, and all the sidewalks that are along Schenkel Lane. And most recently, we've been working on trying to get the Thoroughbred Trail, which will connect the university, KSU, down to downtown. So lots of good stuff there. I've served on a number of different community boards. I've been on the 2nd Street Task Force. I've been on the Board of Zoning Adjustments and on the Planning Commission. And I guess I'd tell you all that long list, and there's other stuff I left off, but it's because I do care, and public service is something that's really important to me. It's one of my core values.
Well, and it's an important value to have. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the biggest issue facing the City Commission right now, and how would you address it if elected?
Wow, well, there's so many, and I have a platform which I've developed, and maybe we can talk about that later. That's not necessarily the biggest issue right now. The biggest issue is something that's blindsided all of us, and that's what's happening with the COVID emergency and what it's going to be doing to impact the city operations, the city budget. The current commission is going to have to be the first ones to grapple with that, because the revenue is going to be short this year. But next year, when hopefully I'm in office, I'm going to have to deal with creating a brand new budget that will not be as flush as it has been in the past. So I guess part of it, we're going to have to watch and see what the current commission does. I don't think there's going to be any easy answers. I think there's going to be some pain and making some cuts, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also not a time for the commission to spend frivolously. They need to hold back on some of the projects that they really want done. It's unfortunate, but it's a reality. But during the time where we're low on lots of money, I think it's a time for good planning. It's a time to sit back and think about what the future can be and start putting together plans on how to make that a reality. One of the things that I think the city needs to move towards is called a capital improvement plan, which is basically a 5-year plan on what are the issues that you want to work towards, and having a fiscally responsible outline of how you're going to do that. What we see every year is a priority setting session by the commission, and they come up with brand new things, especially when you have a new batch of people that come into office, and there's no continuity, there's no predictability. So if we can have a 5-year plan that outlines that we're going to build this project 2 years from now, or start the design of a project this year, then we can really be more accountable to the citizens and also have a good outline of how to get there.
Okay. Well, given the ongoing economic crisis that we're going to be facing, and that every city is going to be facing, really, do you think this is the time to revisit the issue of a combined government, like merged city-county government?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think that was one that came up in one of our state journal questions. Frankly, it's not one of my priorities. It's not something that I think we need to address right now. It's it's been on the table for years. There's a big battle many years ago. I don't even know, 15 years ago or more. And it's something that, surfaces from time to time. But I think there's a lot more important things to try to address. If someone brings that to the table and wants to talk about it, I'll be there to listen and see what people have to say. But it's not something that I'm going to lead or fight. It's just not that important to me right now.
Okay. Well, we currently have the city manager form of government. So what do you see as the role of a city commissioner in that form of government?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been involved with different issues with the city over the years, and I've attended many meetings, and there's been different casts of people in the mayor and the city commission roles. And one of the things that I've really seen a problem with is it's too much micromanagement. The city manager needs to run the city on a day-to-day basis, and the commission needs to set the priorities. They need to set the vision and the priorities, and have the city manager work with their staff to make it happen. I think we have a good city manager right now, and as long as we have somebody competent in that role, then I think the city commission needs to, as individuals on the commission, needs to step back and let them do this job.
Okay. What steps can Frankfort take to engage in healthy emergency planning, whether it's for a natural disaster, illness, or climate catastrophes?
Well, that's an interesting question.
That was submitted, so I thought I would throw it out there. Let's see what we got.
Well, good planning is something that I advocate on all fronts. A lot of my focus tends to be on building things, things with like parks and sewers and public works kinds of issues, and as well as planning and zoning. But emergency services are critical. Who could have seen COVID coming? And I know that people that work that are police and fire and the EMS, they have such critical roles, and we need to be able to have the supplies, the things that they need, so that they can continue to protect us under any kind of emergency. So,
okay.
I would say, yeah.
So how do you think the city can improve communications with its people? When we talk about, planning and all this, but then that has to be communicated. And then there's also the opportunity for citizens to communicate with their leadership. So how do you think the city can improve communications with people, whether it's making an easy report about a pothole or publishing vital public health information or anything in between?
Yeah, communication is one of the key things. And I've seen some communication improve with the city over the years. It's still not where it needs to be, in my opinion. One of the things that there always tends to be these different issues that come up, whether it's a project that's being worked on or a hot button issue that people, there's different sides on that. And what we need to do is become more efficient on how we run our meetings. I've been to too many city commission meetings that are 3 or 4 hours long. You have people sitting in the audience just waiting to get to their agenda item because they're poorly run. They need to be facilitated differently. And when we have hot issues or project issues, we need to have separate meetings so that people can go there and be focused just on that. I've been to meetings where there was an agenda item where it was first or second on the agenda, and I've had to wait an hour just to get to that. Yeah. That's not acceptable, in my opinion. So finding better ways to run our meetings is one thing. We've also talked over the years of having a community liaison, and we have someone that sort of is in that role now. Blair Hecker does a good job with communications and getting stuff out on different social media. So that's important. And then also the commissioners have to, as well as the mayor, have to find ways to listen and provide feedback. One of the things that I think is lacking, and what I'm going to do, is I've started to have put together an email service, so that during my election campaign, I can communicate with people about that. But once, hopefully in office, then I can continue to share updates on important things from time to time, as well as receive emails from people. So I think that providing regular emails, they used to do a newsletter, mail out newsletter. I thought that was a great way to get information out to citizens.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some projects that are happening in Frankfort.
Okay.
One big one is Parcels B and C downtown.
Sure.
So with that, Frankfort has a unique opportunity to facilitate economic stimulus, and that's so important now more than ever because of what we're facing post-COVID. So the question is whether the developer can find a viable way to move forward post-COVID, because things are going to be different for a while. So is there anything the city should do, or what should city government do, if anything, to reduce the developer's risk in an effort to make the project successful?
Right. Well, let me start by saying I've developed a campaign sort of slogan that I've called, or I say, building a better Frankfort. And sometimes I like to say, let's build a better Frankfort together. I have three different main points or main objectives on my platform. One of them is addressing downtown and building a strong downtown. I was involved with the original master plan. In fact, I took that idea with a couple other citizens to the city manager at the time and said, look, this State Tower is about to be demolished. The convention center is going to be demolished. We need to be proactive and figure out what we want back in here. Otherwise, we may just get chaos. Mm-hmm. And so we convinced her to move forward. And fortunately, she took the ball and ran. And we went through a great master planning process for downtown. And it included those areas on parcels B and C. I was also involved with helping write the zoning code for that will be used on those for the development there, so that we have the appropriate type of development. And what I've seen so far from the developer is it meshes very well with the master plan and the zoning code. So in terms of making sure that this moves forward, it's a critical piece. I've not talked to the developer in many, many months, so I don't know where they stand, but we need to find ways to make it happen. There's been discussion of a TIF, a tax increment financing district, which would give some tax breaks to the developer over a number of years. I think I would support that. Part of that would go towards improvements that would be public improvements, like the construction of Washington Street or sidewalks or some of the streetscape or public parking. So I think that kind of thing, where we can take some of that and take that off the shoulders of the developer, hopefully that would make it become a reality.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yes, it's something I've wanted to see for many years.
Yeah. Well, another project going on downtown is based on the Tiger Grant that Frankfort got in 2016. We received $8 million in federal grants to reconstruct the 2nd Street corridor. Are you familiar with those plans, and how do you feel about they've shared the planned improvements? So what aspects of it do you particularly like, or is there something you dislike? How are you feeling about those plans?
Well, I'm very familiar with 2nd Street. That is my neighborhood. I live close by. My kids both went to 2nd Street school. So we've spent many times walking, biking, and driving along that area. It's an important corridor. And one of the things that I learned from walking my kids to school is how dangerous the intersection at Bridge Street and 2nd Street was. So with my background as a transportation design engineer, I went forward to the city and I basically had sketched up an alternative design for that intersection to try to remove some of the fast turning movements off of Bridge Street, and to improve the pedestrian crossings. In fact, I saw a kid get hit there one time. So fortunately, he was fine, but it was because of how it was designed. Pushing it forward with improvements on 2nd Street has been something that I've supported for a long time and been involved with the whole time. Yeah. I think the new design is going to be quite nice with the redesign of that intersection in particular. They're really getting a lot of people involved in the project. This is something that, it's going to be a good model to use in terms of getting people's input, in terms of what their preferences are on some of the lighting and the benches and the art, and that kind of thing. And then walking and biking is going to be accommodated. It's not an afterthought. So I think this will really set that whole corridor up for not just improvements to the public realm, but also for more private investment along there.
Okay. Well, speaking of that, how do you think the City Commission can incentivize to attract new businesses, new industry to our community?
Well, you have to be cautious with what you're talking about with incentives. Yeah. I think trying to improve our quality of living so that it's an attractive place to live for both the owners and managers, but as well as the workers. I think a lot of businesses, that's one of their top things that they look for. We also need to make sure we have the workforce that for the 21st century, people that have the skills, that are educated correctly. So I think if we have the people that have those skills and a community that is attractive, I think that is the kind of incentive. I think you just have to be careful of giving away too much in terms of tax incentives or cheap land and that kind of thing. There's too many communities that sell their soul to get not enough in return.
Okay.
I also think that we need to make sure that we run the numbers. Are we really going to get the benefits and compare that to what it's actually going to cost us before we pull the trigger?
Okay. As we've seen recently with recent events, buying local is crucial. We want to support our local businesses. We want to keep our local economy healthy. So how would you work with the Chamber of Commerce to support local businesses and services that are provided by our local nonprofits?
Well, certainly local businesses, wherever we can have local business, it's so important for our economy and for the citizens here. Who is going to care the most about Frankfort in terms of owning businesses and running businesses is the people that live here and own property here. So finding ways to work with local businesses, to advertise them, is important. And then you also mentioned local organizations. I mentioned I've been involved with the Women's Shelter, and then we have another important organization, the Humane Society. We need to really support them at the city. I think we need to contribute more because those are very important services that both of those things provide for people in need and animals that are in need. This is not just something that should be totally driven at the nonprofit level.
Okay. We're running a little short on time, so I want to get to some other issues.
Okay.
In the last city commission election, candidates commented on the stagnant population growth in Franklin County, and that Frankfort needs a positive change to spur growth. Do you feel like the current city commission has made that positive impact in moving Frankfort in the right direction? And what would you have done differently?
Well, it's interesting. Growth is a term that's thrown out there all the time, and I'm not sure if everybody really thinks through what they mean by growth. Is it you want more population? Why do you want more population? Do you want more jobs or more restaurants or more things to do? What is it that you want to grow? What is so important to grow? I guess I don't really want to critique the current commission on that specific issue, but I believe that growth, if we're going to have it, it needs to come slow and steady. We do not need an explosion or in population to improve our economy or improve other parts of our community. We've seen many communities across Kentucky that have gone through very intense periods of growth, and they've sprawled, and it is going to cost them. It's not something that's going to improve the economy. It's going to actually be a negative thing. So if you do it very deliberately, very well planned, and focus growth in infill and redeveloping within our city, where we don't need more city services, it's not going to cost us more money as taxpayers. I think that's what we need to do.
Okay. Well, you mentioned infill, which is important here in Frankfort, because we have a lot of vacant buildings. So,
Sure.
Do you, any ideas for how you would address the need for infill?
Well, infill, I mean, that's the second actually out of my 3 bullets on my platform, because when you drive around, you see lots of vacant buildings, like you say, lots of for lease or for sale signs. And so continuing to build more office buildings where we have lots of office space is detrimental. It takes up land unnecessarily, and it hurts the people that own those properties, that invested in those properties already. So, but we also have areas like the Century 21 Shopping Center, which is dozens of acres. It is really underutilized. And so the city ought to take a proactive role, maybe working with our economic development to find ways to either have the current owner of that property plan and redevelop it, or to encourage them to sell it so that somebody else can. We could get a whole lot more, and that property could be a much better neighbor for the people that live off of Collins Lane that back up to it, for example.
Sure. Okay. Again, like I said, we're getting short on time, so I want to give you some maybe quick fire questions that would be short answers.
All right.
Do you support allowing chickens within city limits?
Well, that's a topic that I think the current commission is dealing with right now, and so I'll be curious to see what they do. If it's something that they end up punting, I think we need to talk about it. I think if they address the issue, it needs to be done in a way that protects people's properties, so that the number of chickens are limited. They have coops, that there's no roosters. You don't want noise. You don't want odors. So if it can be done in a way that protects people, then yes.
Okay. Would you support regulations on food trucks?
Frankly, I don't know that answer. I haven't thought about that one. It may be something that's necessary.
Yeah, we're getting more and more food trucks in the area, and so that's something that's a question someone submitted, and they figure it's something that's going to come up at some point.
Sure.
Where do you stand on the bicycle ban at Leslie Morris Park?
It's one of the most ridiculous things that the city commission has done. They've wasted so much time and effort on something that was unnecessary. I saw both sides of the issue. Protecting Fort Hill, protecting the fort that's up there and historic resources is critical. There's 250 acres of land there on Leslie Morris Park. There's plenty of space where bicyclists, namely mountain bikers, can go and not have any kind of impact on the fort. So spending all this time and arguing and going for a conservation easement is just unnecessary.
Okay. Some of the candidates have not been responding to the questions sent by the State Journal. If that includes you, why have you not taken this opportunity to make your views and ideas known to a wider audience?
That's a good question. I've answered some of the questions, and there's several of the questions that I've missed. And it's not that I don't want to answer the questions. There's just been times where I've been overly busy with my work with dealing with kids in school and this whole transition to working at home. And so it's not for ignoring the State Journal. I've answered several of them, and I will continue to try to do that as long as they're doing it.
Yeah. We've all been going through a big change lately, haven't we?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I'm going to give you some time to talk about the goals you want to champion, and look right into your camera and talk to our viewers and our voters and tell them what's important to you and why they should vote for you.
Well, I've mentioned a few things already. The first thing is I have three main objectives. One is I think we need to strengthen the downtown. Two is improve our existing neighborhoods all over the city. And the third is promote infill development and redevelopment. I think I've hit a lot of stuff on downtown already, but there's lots of great things that are happening downtown already. Lots of new businesses. You got things like Hoggies and Goodwood Restaurant and Sig Lushers. There's tons of investing going on and renovations that are being done one building at a time. So there are good things that are happening, but like we talked about before, parcels B and C, we need to make sure that that ball keeps going. Improving existing neighborhoods. There's great neighborhoods all over the city, but a lot of them have their own issues and we can't ignore them. So I think looking at ones that have drainage issues or speeding traffic or derelict property owners or landlords, as well as all those things need to be addressed. And if there's incentive programs like we've done with downtown, the city has done with downtown properties to help people reinvest into their properties, then I think that could be a good program to continue on. And then the third is infill development. I think we've touched on that a lot, but that's something that's so critical, and the city has pretty much been hands off on that. I think we need to be more proactive to make these things happen and to try to relieve some of the pressure to sprawl out towards Lawrenceburg or out towards Lexington or Shelbyville. We don't need to do that. It's going to be better for us as taxpayers if we redevelop the land that we already have. And then going back to how we operate with the city commission is that we need to have change how we do business. We need to have more civil discussions, stop micromanaging the city manager, and let him do his job, and find better ways to provide citizens so that they can give their input.
Okay. Well, how can folks learn more about you? Do you have a Facebook, website?
Oh, sure. I've got just about everything, I think. Yeah, so my website is brentsweger.com, and I'm sure you'll have my name up on the video here, but it's brentsweger.com. I have Facebook, I have Instagram, I have a YouTube channel, and email, and that's brent@brentsweger.com. So lots of ways you can learn more.
That's right. No reason why they shouldn't know about you and everything you stand for, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, we want to thank you for your time today. I know that our viewers appreciate hearing from you and getting to know a little more about you. And to our viewers, let me say, voting's different this year. So be sure to go online and go to govoteky.com to request your ballot and get up to date on the voting process. Because this year it's different, so it's time. It's election season, people, so let's get informed and let's go voice your choice anytime between now and June 23rd. And that's all we have for this edition of Meet the Candidates, so we'll see you next time.